Good evening. At this time, I will call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of the Thousand Oaks City Council and Redevelopment Agency for Tuesday, October 24th, 2006. Would you all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under indivisible, with liberty and justice. Thank you. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Fox is absent at this time. Councilmember Bill de la Pena? Present. Councilmember Irwin?
Here.
Councilmember Glancy?
Here.
Mayor Gillette?
Here. Special announcements and requests for continuance of any public hearing or agenda item. Mrs. Bill de la Pena.
Thank you. I would like to request a continuance of number 9A, which deals with the Los Robles Greens Golf Course Complex, to have more time to study this 128-page document, as well as to give the citizens a chance to look at it as well. I have received a request from a citizen who was part of the ad hoc committee to look at this more closely, and the document was not available for public review until Friday, and that did not lend itself to enough time for a member of the public to analyze this document.
Okay, who is the current committee on Los Robles Golf Course? Mrs. Irwin and?
Councilmember Fox.
And Mr. Fox. I'll tell you what, I'm going to wait until Mr. Fox gets here, and since they're on the committee, that's really who it should come through, and see how they feel about that time. Okay? My assumption is that Mr. Fox is on his way, probably caught in traffic, and will be here shortly. Mrs. Irwin?
Maybe we should actually ask Ms. Hong if there's anything that needs to be done by today.
Well, any discussion, I wanted to do it all at the same time, and so that Mr. Fox could hear whatever or ask whatever questions he wanted. I think that's probably the best way to handle it. So, okay. Is there anything else under special announcements that we didn't make the agenda? All right, fine. Item 5, special presentations. We have 2 this evening. Proclamation National Hospice and a proclamation for National Homeless, and I will come down to the podium to present those. The first is a proclamation for November as National Hospice and Palliative Care Month in honor of Hospice of the Caneo, which is an all-volunteer hospice in our community to help local families in need. Terry Arias, Hospice of the Caneo board member, is here to receive the proclamation. Tell us more about this worthwhile organization. Terry, if you want to meet me here at the podium. Why don't you go ahead and then I'll give you the proclamation.
I think that sounds great.
Please.
Thank you, Mayor Gillette, City Council members. My name is Terry Arias, and I'm representing Hospice of the Caneo in Thousand Oaks. I just want to take a moment to thank the Mayor, the City Council, and the community for the supporting hospice during National Hospice Month and for our last 30 years. In a few months, we'll be celebrating 3 decades in this community. Our hospice volunteers accompany patients through the most challenging journey of their lives. Families who use hospice frequently report that their only regret would have been not calling hospice sooner. Your continued support has helped us to provide Thousand Oaks citizens dignity and comfort at the end of their lives, and provide love and support through our counseling programs for loved ones left behind. We can't thank you enough for helping us through all these years. And just a little reminder that our community tree lighting is going to be on December 3rd at the Garden of the Worlds, and that we also will have a tree stacked at the Oak Shopping Center during the month of December. Thank you.
I'd like to present this. At this time, it's my honor to present this proclamation in honor of National Hospice Palliative Care Month. Hospice and palliative care provides patients and families the highest quality care during life-limiting illness and at the end of life through pain management, symptom control, caregiver training, and assistance, and emotional and spiritual support, allowing patients to live fully up until the final moments, surrounded and supported by the faces of loved ones, friends, and committed caregivers. And last year, more than 1.2 million Americans and their families received care from the 4,000 hospice and palliative care programs in communities throughout the United States. And more than 400,000 trained volunteers contribute 18 million hours of service to hospice program annually. And providing high-quality hospice and palliative care reaffirms our belief in the essential dignity of every person, regardless of age, health, or social status, and that every stage of human life deserves to be treated with the utmost respect and care. And Hospice of the Conejo provides these services locally to our community and surrounding area. Now therefore I, Dennis C. Gillette, Mayor of the City of Thousand Oaks, on behalf of the entire City Council, do hereby proclaim November 2006 as National Hospice Palliative Care Month, and encourage citizens to observe this month and appropriate activities and programs. Thank you, sir, very much for everything you do in this area.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's. Our second presentation is a proclamation of National Homelessness and Hunger Awareness Week, November 11th through the 18th, 2006. Here in the Conejo Valley, Lutheran Social Services coordinates the homeless feeding program locally and is hosting a public forum at CLU on November 14th. Chris Pointner, Program and Development Director for Lutheran Social Services, is here to tell us more about the forum and accept this proclamation. Ms. Pointner?
This local event for National Homeless and Hunger Awareness Week is co-sponsored by Manna Food Pantry of the Conejo Valley, Catholic Charities, California Lutheran University Office of Campus Ministry, Food Share of Ventura County, the Ventura County Homeless and Housing Coalition, and Lutheran Social Services. Did you know that in order to afford a one-bedroom apartment in Ventura County, if you're earning minimum wage, you'd have to work 132 hours per week? The hourly wage needed to afford a two-bedroom apartment in Ventura County is over $22 an hour. The income needed to afford the market price home in Ventura County is skyrocketing at more than $120,000 a year. And more than 6,000 residents in the Conejo Valley are living below the poverty rate. Food Share, Manna, Catholic Charities, and Lutheran Social Services are providing services including food, clothing, housing, and other assistance to more than 20,000 men, women, and children every year. So please join us on Tuesday, November 14th, 2006, from 7 to 9 p.m. at California Lutheran University in the Press Brandt Forum to hear local experts speak on hunger and poverty and how they affect the Conejo Valley, yes, the Conejo Valley, and find out what you can do to help. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council, for this recognition and for your continued support and friendship for these organizations and the services that we provide to your community.
Thank you very much, Chris. At this time, it's my honor to present this proclamation in honor of National Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week. Each year, National Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week is co-sponsored by the National Student Campaign Against Hunger and Homelessness. And during this week, a number of schools, communities, and cities take part in a nationwide effort to bring greater awareness to the problems of hunger and homelessness. And as part of this national event, Lutheran Social Services, in conjunction with Catholic Charities, MANA, Food Share of Ventura County, and California Lutheran University, are working together to heighten homelessness awareness in Thousand Oaks. And more than 1,000 individuals are homeless in the Conejo Valley. And every year, more than 10,000 meals are served through the Conejo Valley Meal Program, and 120 nights of shelter are provided to those with no place to lay their head. Now, therefore, I, Dennis C. Gillette, Mayor of the City of Thousand Oaks, on behalf of the entire City Council, do hereby proclaim November 12th through 18th, 2006, as National Hunger and Homelessness Awareness Week, and urge residents to support these organizations in their efforts to help feed, clothe, and house the homeless in our area. Chris, thank you so very much for what you do. Thank you. Thank you very much. At this time, item 6, public comment section of our agenda. Would the clerk please announce item 6, public comments?
This is the time and place for public comments. A speaker card is available for those wishing to address the City Council regarding items on the agenda or on a subject within the city's jurisdiction. Pursuant to Council standards of operation, the Mayor may assist any speaker from straying into areas not within the city's jurisdiction. All remarks shall be addressed to the Council as a whole, and remarks directed at a particular council member are not allowed. Under state law, issues discussed under public comments can have no action unless listed on the agenda and may be referred to the city manager for administrative action or scheduled on a subsequent agenda. All documents for City Council and the official city record should be presented to the city clerk prior to speaking. Speakers are requested to state their name and city of residence for the record. 5 people have presented cards, and pursuant to council standards, speakers are allowed 3 minutes. The yellow light displays when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Our first speaker this evening, we have 2 speakers, Marty Garcia and Vanessa Berlinski from Many Mansions. Please come forward. I would ask all speakers to please give their name and community of residence. Welcome.
Thank you. Marty Garcia, Newberry Park. And this is Vanessa Berlinski. She's our excellent special events coordinator of Many Mansions, and I'm the current president of the board of Many Mansions. And we're here to thank you, first of all, for all your support in the past and your ongoing support to affordable housing and the mission of Many Mansions. And secondly, as you can tell by our aprons, we have our premier fundraiser on November 5th, which is the Bowls of Hope, which Vanessa will tell you more about. And some of you have helped me serve soup last year.
Thank you. As Marty said, my name is Vanessa Berlinski. I'm a resident of Thousand Oaks. I also wanted to thank all of you for your continued support to Many Mansions. This year, our Bowls of Hope project is happening on Sunday, November 5th at Calamigos Ranch from 11 to 2 p.m. I'm here to extend an invitation to you to join us on that day to continue to spread the awareness for affordable housing and all the services that Many Mansions provides within this community. The event is a spectacular event with a display of 500 to 700 bowls that have been made by local community members and artists. You get to take home a bowl as a reminder of the day. Once you receive your bowl, you do get to go into the event and proceed into a soup and bread line, which simulates a homeless shelter, which many of our residents have had to deal with in the past. Soups and breads are donated by local restaurants. We do have our silent auction, as well as live entertainment and an art gallery of all of the youth through our schools that have been submitted. Again, I encourage you to come out to this event, and at this time, I would like to extend my thanks once again. And we do have some gifts of appreciation for all of you, and at this time, I'd like to ask that we can approach you to distribute those gifts.
Thank you. Procedure is for the city clerk to accept things, but if you want to, why don't you bring them here, and it'll give us a little more airtime, and people can see these beautiful bowls. So. One more for Mr. Fox right on the end. Yeah, why don't you put it right? I should mention we had an opportunity a couple months ago to paint bowls for Bowls of Hope. It was somewhat of an embarrassing situation since Dr. Glancy's wife is an artist and truly knew what she was doing. And that was not the case for either myself or, well, that was not the case for myself. So, in any event, it's beautifully done and much appreciated. Much success to you. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Tula Kalovis, followed by Karen Kelly. Good evening, Ms. Kalovis.
Good evening. Tula Kalovis, Thousand Oaks. That I'd like you to look at. As a member of the Linrod Traffic Ad Hoc
Ms. Clovis, you want to get a little closer to the microphone? It's not picking. There you go. Thank you.
As a member of the Linrod Traffic Ad Hoc Committee, I know that the traffic problem will be corrected. For this, we must thank Mr. Gillette, who was instrumental in forming the committee and has genuine concern for the problem. However, your immediate attention is needed on the intersection of Lotus and Lynn, where we have the following situation. As you see in the picture, the cars get piled up from Camino Manzanos all the way to Jans, and they block Lotus intersection. This is a traffic code violation, a safety violation, and in case of emergency, it could be very serious. We cannot go out. This hazard has to be eliminated, and I'm here to please ask you to take interest even before we discuss the other problems of Linrod. Now, changing subjects, every man, according to Aesop, carries two bags on his shoulder, a bag in front full of his neighbor's faults, and a large bag in the back filled with his own faults. Attending the 3 city council election forums, I witnessed a real-life example of this Aesop's fable. 2 candidates tend to visit the front bag routinely. So let me highlight some very important items in their backpack. They do not see the unethical sharing of funds. By sharing expenses, they circumvent the election donation limit, and they have the advantage of double the funds to advertise. Expense reports do not answer the ethics of this action. They accuse the majority council members of acting as a group, but they are members of a cabal with a blind allegiance to the power behind them. We need independent council members. Factions are undemocratic and dangerous. When Mr. Anderson and Mr. Del Campo and Mr. Wilson were elected with the help of the so-called open space movement, and later chose to vote their way, they were called Benedicts. Mr. Mastri, in his last election forum in the Westlake Plaza, told my husband and I, in a very matter-of-fact manner, that he had nothing to do with these people anymore. It is on record one of these candidates is the only council member who voted against Measure B. Had it passed, Freeway 23 would have been widened sooner, and those people would not use Linrod as an alternate freeway. Mrs. De La Peña is responsible for contributing to the traffic problems on Linrod and the overall deterioration of the traffic conditions in the city since the freeway traffic was forced into our streets, and she chose to oppose a possible solution where she was able to do so. They shamelessly slander their opponents without proof and allow those that support them to do the same. On the bright side, I'd like to inform you that the Benedicts are increasing and the cabal is shrinking to a group of a few irrational people.
Mrs. Clovis, City Manager has a comment. Mr. Mitnick.
With respect to the Lynn Road noise or the traffic issue, I'm sorry, Police Chief Dennis Carpenter will talk to you.
I beg your
Our
pardon.
police chief will follow up with you right now.
Okay.
He's waiting off to your
He's
right.
over on the left.
I'll go
your
out
right.
and talk to him.
Thank you. Karen Kelly, followed by Vicki Arndt.
Hello, my name is Karen Kelly, and I reside at 1813 Montgomery Road in Thousand Oaks. And I was last here in May to discuss the problem of the traffic volume and speed on Montgomery Road due to the adult school. Jim Ashiko, the traffic engineer of the city, has performed 2 counts of the traffic volume and the speed and has concluded that the traffic volume with the school in session is 3,350 cars per day. The traffic volume without the school in session, he was able to calculate that based on October 6th that the school was not in session, is 2,350 cars. So there's 1,000 cars going down our tiny little street a day to go into the adult school at Conejo Valley, adult school on Old Farm Road between Jans and Las Flores. So a third of the cars that are going down our road are due to the school traffic. Now, this, according to Mr. Mashiko, this type of residential street should only handle about 25 cars or less. So this is a concern to the residents because he actually was able to look online and determine that the school was originally an adult school for English as a second language. The school has expanded to become much more with a lot of computer programs, which is likely added to the volume of traffic. The last count that was done was at the Las Flores end of Montgomery, which is not very adequate because most of the traffic is coming from off of Jans Road to Old Farm Road, and it was 1,830 cars. So it's not completely accurate to compare that number now to the 3,350 cars coming down the road in Montgomery, but it does show that there is, over the years, there has been, in his opinion, a dramatic increase in the volume of cars on Montgomery Road. The speed is actually not an issue, so it came out at 27 miles per hour, what he thought was okay for a residential street. But what I'm coming here to address is what our options as a community is. Another access point. The answer is restrictive enrollment, is alternative parking with a shuttle service into the school. What is the goal of the school? Where do we as a community go from here in terms of the volume, and is it going to, enrollment going to increase? Is it going to become so extensive that at some point the volume is going to be to where we can't even get out of our driveways, which is very difficult. It's very difficult to walk our horses down the street. It's a dangerous situation. The gate was closed on Waverly Heights in 1999. I don't know how that happened. Jim Mashiko said there's a lot of controversy around the council when that happened. Their volume of traffic was 740 cars. It dropped down to 250 cars after their gate was closed. So that was the second access point into the school.
Okay. Thank you. Vicki Arndt, followed by Carl Alanis.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Vicki Arndt, and I live in Thousand Oaks. I have a financial planning firm in the city, and my husband Michael is on the faculty at Cal Lutheran and artistic director of the Kingsman Shakespeare Festival. We lived here in the Conejo Valley for 25 years, and we've been actively involved in the community. I'm here tonight to share some information about Dennis Gillette. I have had the privilege over the past few months of working closely with Dennis on his campaign. I've been on his committee. I've never spoken at a city council meeting before. And I've never been actively involved in politics. But when Dennis asked me to participate in his reelection bid, I realized that it was important to give my time and energy to support someone who has been so good for this city. I first met Dennis when I was an administrator at California Lutheran University almost 20 years ago. I was impressed with his ability to handle the competing interests of university employees for limited resources. He listened to all sides and always came up with a solution that stretched the resources to meet the greatest need. He did it with grace and respect despite the often difficult personalities involved. I've always liked him and thought highly of him, but I can tell you today that after working closely with him on this campaign, I think even more highly of him. He is a man of utmost integrity and unwavering commitment. Even in the face of lies and slanderous comments, Dennis remains steady in the resolve that has guided him through 42 years of public service, and that is, all citizens have the right to say what they believe. He has spent the majority of his career defending that right. Throughout this campaign, I've had the privilege of speaking with fellow citizens and observing our local government in action. Without exception, each person who has requested to speak to Dennis received a call from him. Whether a small issue or a big one, Dennis responded. I attended neighborhood gatherings and heard the story of one woman whose mother lived in a local retirement community. The new owners of the retirement community decided to raise their rents to a point that would make it unaffordable for most residents. This woman contacted Dennis, and together they worked with the management of the retirement community to give residents more time to find alternative housing. Dennis listened, he responded, and he acted to help someone in need. I could not be prouder to be associated with someone who's not only willing to serve, but has qualifications that are second to none. I encourage everyone listening to visit his website, www.dennisgillette.com, to see his list of accomplishment and goals for the city. The citizens of our city are fortunate beyond measure that Dennis is willing to continue his exemplary service to our community. Thank you.
Carl Alanis, followed by Bob Wilson.
Good evening, Mayor, Councilman, and staff. My name is Carl Alanis, and I live in Thousand Oaks and work in Thousand Oaks. I would like to touch on a subject that has gathered some attention in the past couple of days. It's the Oak Mall improvement, which was passed 4-1 last night, which I feel is a long-awaited project for the community and the merchants within the mall. The experience, creativity, and money that Mesa Ridge is investing into the mall will move the Oaks Mall forward in becoming a world-class shopping center. We will benefit as a city when it comes to gathering more tax revenue from the shoppers within the city limits, but especially from the neighboring cities. The demand for a Nordstrom's department store within the Oaks Mall is overwhelming. That's apparent last night when all the residents and non-residents of the city showed up to the Planning Commission meeting. This is a milestone project, and it would not be possible if it wasn't for the people on the City Council at the beginning, such as Bob Wilson, Dennis Gillette, and Andy Fox. Their commitment, focus to detail, and their leadership to the city is an admirable quality that is appreciated by most of the residents of Thousand Oaks. I applaud your dedication to serving the community, and I look forward to your guidance for the next 4 years. What makes you different from all the rest is your follow-through, your implementation, hands-on experience. This is the best endorsement you can get. Andy Fox, Dennis Gillette, and Bob Wilson have those qualities, and I'm proud to call you our former mayors, councilmen, and in the next 4 years, our city's future. Thank you, Mayor, Councilman, and staff for your time.
Thank you. Bob Wilson, followed by our last speaker, Suzanne Duckett.
Good evening, Council. Mayor Gillette. Again, I speak about good government, and it was a pleasure to see Councilwoman Jackie Irwin, Councilman Tom Clancy, and Mayor Gillette at the dedication for the Cal Lutheran University gym and that tremendous facility out there. And that's taken a long time and a lot of help from City Council. One of the great things that you've done, and you should be very, very proud of the work that you did helping that take place. It was some $80 million. It puts that Division III school probably and facility-wise up to a Division I school, maybe. Someday there'll be Division I, and we might even be playing SC-UCLA if it keeps going the right direction. We might have beaten UCLA. Anyway, it was a pleasure to see you there, and then later on, it was again a pleasure to see you at the Boys and Girls Club dinner at the Reagan Library. I just think it's a terrific thing to see our council people out for these events. It shows your interest. You have busy schedules, but again, it was a terrific thing to see. Now that I've got your attention, we have 2 events coming up. There's a Boy Scout dinner Saturday night, and we'd love to have you there. There's also our Police Charitable Foundation golf tournament on Monday, and there's still some seats available for the dinner, and there's still a few foursomes open. So we'd love to see the council there. We'd also like to see any of the public. It's interesting that we talked about, the previous speaker talked about the Oaks Shopping Center. This has been a 4-year project, and I think that one of the key things here is that all of you have seen what's happened around our city, such as Simi Valley, Camarillo. These areas are pulling in their shopping centers as fast as they can get them up. Our center has been, unfortunately, a long time in the remodel process. This was a 4-year project by Mace Rich, and I truly feel that this is the beginning of one of the greatest shopping centers in Southern California. You have to understand that what Nordstrom's does, and I hope the public understands, Nordstrom's can demand up to $20 million from a city to come into their city in sales tax rebates and revenues. We paid $0 to have Nordstrom's come in. It's a coup for our city. It's a coup for Mace Rich, and I think that partnership is going to go a long ways for us to be the best shopping center in Thousand Oaks. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final speaker under public comments, Suzanne excuse me, I'm sorry, Mr. Wilson? Yes. Could you please come back for a second? Councilmember Glancy had a question.
Mr. Wilson, would you please publicize any contact phone numbers for anyone in the audience that would like to participate in your 2 events coming up?
Sure. You can get me directly at 805-444-1038. Carl Alanis, who spoke before us, is 805-371-9800. He's also a director on the Police Charitable Foundation with me. And we certainly love to see some of our residents come out. There is space available for both events. But thank you very much for asking.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing you.
Thank you. Suzanne Duckett.
Good evening. Suzanne Duckett, Thousand Oaks. I'm back for a second meeting to ask the city manager to speak to the people who are running for city council and ask them to remove their illegal signs. These have been placed on private property. They're placed on freeway on-ramps and off-ramps. They're on public land. And worse yet, they're in businesses, on business property, where these businesses have not wanted these signs. These people have not asked, Mr. Wilson has not asked, and Louis Masry has not asked for permission to put signs in some businesses, at least 3 that I know of. When the signs are removed by the businesses, those 2 come back and they will replace their signs. Either one or both of those gentlemen. One business owner has removed the signs at least 3 times. Now, these 2 profess to be business leaders, Chamber of Commerce types, business leaders, and they're doing a disservice to businesses that do not want political signs in their front yard, like the auto dealers don't want, because people are offended. They won't go to those businesses and buy from those businesses if the signs that they don't like are in the front yard. There are at least 3 businesses along Teo Boulevard that I never have gone through the front door because of the political signs in the past. So some business owners don't want these. Just look at the auto dealers. There's not a single political sign in their front yard because they know. So please carouse these two. And I know some of the school board people are doing the same thing, but I don't think that they may never have even been advised as to the rules of political sign placing. Thank you.
That concludes our speakers under the public comment section. Item 7, consent calendar. City and Redevelopment Agency consent calendar. Pleasure of the council. Anything? Dr. Glancy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move approval of the consent calendar.
A motion to approve. Comments to the motion? There being none, please vote.
Motion carries 4-0. Councilmember Fox absent.
Thank you. Item 8, public hearings. We have no public hearings this evening. We had the original request on item 9A, and I'm going to again, I'm sorry, Mr. Metnick, you had a comment? Mr. Metnick, you had a comment?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Finance Director Kenny Hong and myself did contact Council Member Andy Fox. He's en route, leaving LA, and he has requested that the council do act on this tonight. He's requested if council can do this after the other agenda items, so he could be here. And so that we're passing that on.
I want to respond to a council member's request, so I'll wait. We'll continue it a little bit further. Mrs. Irwin, you had a comment on this? Same thing. All right, we'll push it as far as we can until Mrs. Spildale, opinion.
Thank you. I have no problem if you wanted to hear this item right now or wait until Councilmember Fox. I was just conveying information that I had received from members of the public that wanted a chance to look at a document that they were not allowed to view before Friday, to take a closer look at it. That's basically what I was requesting. It's a 128-page document, and it's a lot to digest before Tuesday.
Right. Well, I know we got it. I got it. I read it, and I think, but the point is, you've made a legitimate request, and I want to give it the right kind of hearing. And since Mr. Fox is on the committee, I'll push it back as far as I can. And I appreciate your expression of his feelings. Let's see if we can. Let's see where we are when we get to it.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Item 10, City Council Redevelopment Agency reports. Item 10A, implementation of City Agency Affordable Housing Resale Methodology. Mr. Russ Watson, Housing and Redevelopment Manager. Mr. Watson, good evening.
Good evening. Mayor Gillette and Chairman Gillette, this report is being submitted to both council and agency. The item you have before you relates to the resale methodology. Council and agency considered this item at its affordable housing study. Asked staff to return with implementing resolutions for this matter, and that's the purpose of this agenda item. The city and agency regulate resale prices for sale affordable housing through project affordable housing covenants. These agreements have previously pegged the resale price to the change in county median income. For example, if the median income had increased since the price was established, the home first sold, by 20%, then the resale price would calculate at 20% higher than the original purchase price. The original purchase price, by the way, is established by use of the affordable housing cost method, which will be further explained herein. The affordable housing cost method considers changes to that implement factors such as the current interest rate, various housing cost, expenses that are factored into the affordable housing cost formula. These factors, as prices go up or expenses go up, do affect the affordable housing cost method in terms of implementing the resale value. As interest rates go up, for example, prices will go down. As expenses go up, prices will go down. At your affordable housing study, you did authorize a change to the affordable housing cost method, and these resolutions, as noted, implement and include the parameters that staff will look at when using or implementing the affordable housing cost method to both establish the original sales price as well as the resale value. Just as a comparison, or at least reflection of the median income change, it has averaged 3.65% since 1990. During this period, on 4 occasions, the median income did not change, thus the resale values would not have changed. This last year, from 05 to 06, reflected a 2.71% increase in the median income. This chart is intended to show all 3 methods of price, whether it be median income price, unrestricted median income price based on a change of median income, and the affordable housing cost index. It starts at a single point of 100, not necessarily $100,000 worth of value, but it just shows where the trends have gone since 1990 with respect to if at a given point in time we would have calculated a price, what the changes would have been in that calculation since that starting point of 1990. By implementation of tonight's recommendation, the affordable housing cost formula will apply to all future agreements. It will require an amendment to 20 existing agreements with individual owners, and require an amendment to 1 existing developer agreement, and that would be for the Racket Club. State law requires that we take into account in establishing affordable housing cost these factors, including mortgage loan principal and interest, mortgage loan insurance fees, property taxes and assessments, insurance premiums, maintenance expenses, a reasonable allowance for utilities, homeowners fees, and should the cost be associated to a rental project, it would also be a space rent for that project. How we would apply these criteria is that we would take a look at the interest rate on a monthly basis and average that quarterly. So the first 3 months of the year would establish a interest rate to be applied to the next 3 months of the year. Each month we'd take a look at the interest rate, add the 3 together, divided by 3, come up with an average quarterly rate to be applied to the next quarter. We would apply a 10% down payment, which was previously approved by the City Council. We would apply a 1.25% tax rate, which would include bonded indebtedness. It's an average. Some properties have higher rates, a little bit higher. Some have a little bit lower, depending on what tax district they're in. We'd apply a homeowners association fee if it's appropriate. We would apply a monthly utility expense. However, we would adjust that by 25%, giving it a discount basically to reflect the energy efficient appliances and building materials. The utility rate is based on a HUD allowance, and they adjust it periodically, typically every 2 or 3 years. We would not apply a private mortgage insurance to the calculation of the affordable price. A private mortgage insurance may be applied at the time someone is approved for acquisition, but we would not necessarily use that calculation as it relates to establishing the resale price. And once the calculation is complete, we would round up to the nearest $1,000. What affects the affordable housing cost is median income, the number of bedrooms, the down payment, just as an example, for every change in down payment amount, in terms of 5% change in down payment, it changes the value by about $15,000. We have established a 10% assumed down payment that will be applied to all projects. Should that number change by council direction, for every 5% it changes, the value would go up or down about $15,000. Change of interest rate, for every 0.25% of interest, the value changes about $7,000 across the board. So as interest rates go up, the values go down by about that amount. And it's one of the reasons why we decided to look at a quarterly basis, was to establish it based on the prior quarter for use by the next 3 months or the next quarter, wherein if we looked at it on a weekly basis or looked at it on a monthly basis, the prices would move nearly every time you answered the phone to give someone a value. The change in fixed housing costs, whether it be HOA fee or utility expenses, for every $25 change, either up or down, changes that value by $4,000 up or down. So as you can see, these are pretty dynamic numbers. We're just trying to put a push pin in the wall on the corkboard and say, this is the number we're going to use for the next 3 months. Down payment, the 10% down payment will be applied to all agreements, as we had noted. Not all agreements have capital improvement adjustments. New agreements will have a $1,000 per year of ownership adjustment for capital improvements, or at least up to that number. And for the existing agreements that do not have any capital improvement adjustment, we would be recommending a $5,000 or up to $5,000 one-time adjustment to take into account that people have made improvements to the existing affordable projects or properties. In trying to just give you a perspective of what these numbers actually mean, we've looked at 2 projects, the Westlake Vista project as well as the Park Lane. The original price for Westlake Vista was established at $255 in the year 2000. The original price for Park Lane was established at $314,000 in the year 2003. These are very comparable projects, square footage wise, a little different design, a little different location, but essentially they have 3 bedrooms, similar square footage, generally great neighborhoods within the community. Location has nothing to do with how these prices are established. Amenities to the property have really nothing to do with it. It's really based on number of bedrooms and applying formula of income, interest rate, housing expenses. Using the change of median income only, Westlake Vista today values at $295,949. Park Lane values at $334,177. Applying the affordable housing cost formula, the numbers for those 2 properties calculate at $316,000, or for Westlake Vista, or an increase of $20,000. It calculates at $329,000 for Park Lane properties, or a decrease of $5,000. Using the exact same down payment, interest rate, utilities, and applying the HOA fees applicable to each of those properties, there's an $85 difference. It's that $85 difference that calculates the difference in the affordable housing calculation. What the resolutions will allow to existing owners to do is to choose between these two formulas for the existing agreements, so that by implementing a change in affordable housing, a particular property doesn't lose value, but has the opportunity to use the higher value. What's not changed within the agreements would be the city and the agency retains its first right of refusal or option to purchase the property. When these units are offered for sale, there's a requirement in each agreement that they notify the agency or city, and we will take it to the board and ask whether or not you care to buy it. You have purchased 3 of these units to date. All 3 are in the Park Lane. All 3 will be offered for resale very soon. We also have the right to designate an eligible buyer. If the agency does not exercise its options, the owner may sell the unit at the calculated price using allowable adjustments as approved by the resolutions to an eligible income buyer. The other provisions within the resale agreements, restrictions that are not modified, include owner occupancy requirements. There's a drug-free restriction and a maintenance obligation. As noted by the chart, the affordable housing method may cause prices to go up or down. The affordable housing cost, we believe, as noted in this presentation as well as at your affordable housing study, does reflect the best current value of an affordable unit, and that we would also be recommending that the owners choose between either method, providing on what generates a higher equity return, for lack of a better word. Staff's recommendations is the council adopts a resolution that implements this provision. The redevelopment agency adopts a resolution that implements the same provision, and that the city manager, executive director, city attorney, agency council take necessary steps to implement the resolutions. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Questions of Mr. Watson? Ms. Irwin?
Yeah, it wasn't clear. Did you come up with the affordable housing cost formula, or is that a standard formula?
It's a standard formula. It's used statewide. It's basically specified in state regulations as to how to establish the affordable housing cost. The provisions as summarized in the report are required to be looked at and applied to that affordable housing cost, but it is a formula that's used statewide.
So do most agencies use that, or do most use the change in median income?
It's somewhat across the board. I think all agencies use it to first establish the original value. I couldn't necessarily give you a percent.
They use what to establish?
They use the Affordable Housing Cost Index. That's really the only way to establish what the value should be, so someone does not pay more than 30% or 35% of income for the affordable house. That's the purpose of the Affordable Housing Cost Index.
Okay, and how many agencies allow sellers to use whatever method generates a higher return?
I'm not sure that I could give you a percentage or a number.
Are there other agencies that do that?
I would be surprised if there weren't. I think most agencies will pick one or the other in terms of its resale restrictions. This agency many years ago picked, whether consciously or not, a change of median income, which is a very standard formula to use each year. I think what has happened over the past years, because of the interest rate change drops and great interest rates we've had, the market value of homes have gone up, and there's a huge gap between what market rate is and what affordable rate is. The Affordable Housing Cost Index is you apply it to properties that come online at different times of development. Westlake Vista, for example, in 2005, it calculated at $255,000 because interest rates were lower, expenses were lower. And Park Lane calculated at $315 because within those 2 years, interest rates had increased, and various other expenses such as HOA fee were higher than what they originally calculated in it. So that creates one property selling at $314, another property at a lesser number than what it would have been by recalculating the Affordable Housing Cost Index and trying to use a comparison on a year-to-year basis between the two projects. Some agencies also will just, every year they'll pick a sales price for affordable units. All 3-bedroom moderate shall sell at such and such a number. That is an option. It has advantages, it has disadvantages. That's not what's being recommended tonight.
Can I jump in real quick to answer part of those questions?
Mrs. Irwin, the city attorney has a comment that may be pertinent to your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome, city attorney.
I wanted to respond in two ways. The idea of picking and choosing, that the seller gets to pick or choose, is only for the people that currently have restrictions that allow median income. And the reason we're suggesting that is because we would have to go to them, negotiate a change in their agreement to have it be the housing cost method, the affordable housing cost method. So in essence, they are in the driver's seat to choose the one that is most beneficial. And they could say to us, well, we don't want to change anything now. And that's why we've sort of left it as they get to pick and choose, because we actually would have to amend their agreements. And it really is to their benefit to wait and see which one is the better way to go. So we're not really recommending that as a future go forward. And then the only other thing I wanted to say is, as to the formula, the thing that we have control over is how we set the interest rates and how we set the down payment amount. Many cities, Russ, you can correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that some cities, maybe not many, but some cities have the down payment amount set at 0, which would lower the prices of the houses even more. We try to come up with what we thought was reasonable based on what we've seen people put into the programs, and came up with a 10% down payment. That's just an assumption we make. Some people might come in with less, some people might come in with more, but that's how you set the original price and set the resale. The other thing, we made the conscientious decision not to guess or pretend what an interest rate is, but to base it on a quarterly, looking back at the last quarter, because we felt that was the fairer way to do it than to just pick some arbitrary number that may no longer be in reality. So both of those things, the city has the authority to plug in numbers that are reasonable. So if the council were to say, we don't want a 10% down payment, you could offer something else or something more or something less, and you could tell us to do the interest rates in a different way. And as Russ explained, that's what really drives the prices here. Thank you.
I was going to wait until she finished. Thank you. Mrs. Irwin?
So when the redevelopment agency purchases these homes from the existing buyers and they choose that whatever method gives them the higher profit, are you selling it for that price also, or are what is the price that it's being sold for?
I think it would really relate to, would reflect how long the agency kept it. If we calculate a resale or a acquisition value based on the first 3 months or the prior 3 months interest rate, and interest rates went drastically one way or the other, is we calculated a new resale value 3 months later or 6 months later, that price may be slightly different than what it was that we actually purchased it for. The agency will in fact also have expenses as it relates to the acquisition of the prior unit and even possibly the disposition of that unit. So there is a cost to managing and monitoring these affordable units as they turn over, should the agency step into the ownership position of them in between selecting one affordable owner versus another affordable owner.
So the agency is selling it for the affordable housing cost price.
Correct. We're buying it at that calculation and selling it at that calculation.
But you could be buying it at the medium income calculation and selling it at the affordable housing calculation, right? For the current owners?
The three we have purchased before have been based on the change in median income because that's what was in place at the time the agency considered it, yes.
So there could be, the agency could lose a substantial amount of money if there's a big differential between those two methods on the homes that current owners are selling.
A change in median income is probably the most fixed way of knowing what the next value will be. However, as pointed out in the report, there have been 4 times since 1990 that there was no change in median income. So the value of a resale would not have changed during those 4 flat years that median income changed. So it's not easy. It's not a pretty picture. There's 2 or 3 different methods, and the affordable housing cost method basically does establish what is the most current value given all the factors of that we apply to it, and what the value would look like if it was a brand new unit versus a resale unit. It has the most level playing field when you compare an older resale, an older affordable unit that's offered for sale versus a brand new unit that's put on the market.
All right, thank you.
Ms. Spildale, opinion.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Watson. I was wondering whether in the discussions that staff had in coming up with this methodology, and by the way, I do recommend staff for coming up with this. It obviously did take a lot of time and effort to put this together. Did you discuss partnering, or perhaps I shouldn't mention the word partnering, but somehow getting cooperation from the local businesses who may want to participate in helping with a down payment or anything like that for their employee, if we go with the local preference program, which will be discussed, I believe, in the next item?
Implementing the preference provision would apply to these affordable units, but we have not necessarily discussed how they might be applied as it relates to purchase or resale of them. It may be a discussion point that the council wants to explore during the preference topic.
Thank you.
Mrs. Irwin, please.
I just want to clarify once more. So on the example on page 8, where Park Lane, the change in median ends up with a higher price. So the current owners will be allowed to sell for that price, but the agency will be able to sell to the redevelopment agency for that price, but the agency has to sell it for $5,000 less. Is that correct?
Basically, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Further questions, staff? Dr. Clancy?
Thank you. Mr. Watkins, are there other businesses in the area that help employees with their housing costs other than Amgen?
I'm not aware of other business-sponsored programs. There very well may be some. I'm just not aware of them.
Okay, thanks. Another question. In our supplemental package, we cite half a dozen cities or so: San Jose, Novato, Fremont, Palo Alto, Concord, Anaheim, Santa Ana, and Irvine. Thank you. Forget that. Thank you very much for your answer.
Any further questions of staff? Ms. Spildale, opinion.
I have a question for the city attorney regarding.
Oh, good.
regarding item 10A. Is there anything in this particular resale methodology that could be challenged?
No, I don't believe there's anything in the resale methodology that could be challenged. From a legal standpoint, no, because we really are implementing state law. If we were to do something different, we might be challenged.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? Okay, I have two cards. Bob Wilson. Mr. Wilson. I left the hall. Going once, going twice. Suzanne Duckett. Ms. Duckett.
Suzanne Duckett, Thousand Oaks. I was on the Affordable Housing Committee for a year plus, but I'm here tonight speaking for myself and what I observed over that 1 year. Before you even have this discussion of how you're going to do it, what you need is administration in place above anything else, because this was lacking in the past. This city has not done a good job of administering this program, and it's an admirable program, but it's a can of worms. You absolutely need to have the administration lock solid, whether Mr. Watson's going to do it or whether you're going to hire somebody just to oversee this project, this program. In the past, developers have lied, some developers. I'm not saying that this is going, that every single one that's been involved in this has, but there have been developers who have lied and have cheated. One developer built, the doors didn't even look rectangle. The doors were off kilter. I mean, you had to be a crooked person to get through the front door in one of these projects. So the building needs to be overseen. Another project, a developer was building on land next door, not even his own property. Now, all of this stuff got above our city inspectors, so you need somebody to oversee these projects. The unscrupulous developers would get unscrupulous realtors who would then lie to the people that they were selling these affordable housing units to. That needs to be stopped. Then you had the people who were buying were not up front either, some of them. One person's parents paid cash for her unit. Another one got married a day or a week after she bought her unit, because the realtor had told her that if she could qualify for this affordable unit, but if she got married, she wouldn't qualify. So she got married later after she qualified, and she had two big monthly incomes to pay for this. All of the people that came and spoke to the Affordable Housing Committee from one of these projects, I said, could you have gone out there and bought a fixer-upper at market rate? And every single one in that room said yes. But they preferred to buy these new units, these nice new units, that they thought that they were going to sell for a much higher price. That isn't fair, actually, to some of these developers who are on the up and up, because they were the ones that took the big dent if you're going to sell it at market rate. If the people who qualified to buy these units bought them cheap and then want to sell them at market rate, that's not fair to the developer. So you need an administration in place that's going to oversee this whole program before you start talking about how you're going to buy it and how you're going to sell these units. Because this is a huge can of worms. And I don't know whether it's fair to make Mr. Watson, who might be overloaded now, I don't know that that this would be something for him to do. You might need to go out and hire somebody just to oversee this project. So please, get an administration in place first and foremost before you do anything else. You need to know where you're going, how you're going to get there, and what you expect to have in the end if you want good projects. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our speakers. Any additional questions of staff? Pleasure of the council. Ms. Spildale-Lapena.
I was wondering whether staff is able to answer some of the questions posed by the last speaker, because we have had problems similar to what was described with the previous units, and will additional staff be needed in order to implement this program?
Ms. Spildale-Lapena, the city attorney has indicated she has a comment on your response to your question. So, Ms.
Thank
Albano.
you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, staff, and I'm sure Mr. Watson might want to jump in as well. But the newer agreements and the ones that have, for sale housing coming up, they have been written where the city has much more control over the marketing program, over how the selection tenant process, and you may recall that sometime since I've been here, so sometime in the last 20 months, you actually approved an agreement between the city or agency with Cabrillo Economic Development to help actually administer the selection process and make sure that it's done right, as well as mistakes have happened in the past, or as there's been claims that there's been mistakes, we've become much more sophisticated in what's in the agreements for when there's resale or when someone purchases. It is much more obvious now clearly what the resale restrictions are. There's forms that have to be signed. So we've put in a lot of protections, and it's like anything else that you learn from prior misunderstandings that have occurred or from prior incidents. And I think that we've taken a lot of made changes to the process and to the program to try to prevent any kind of problems there were. And in one of the particular in the past, and this will come up again when we speak of the next item, the city wasn't really in control of the process. And so that all of that has changed based on our current agreements.
Mrs. Albano, you're saying that a private entity may then be charged with supervising this or monitoring this, such as Cabrillo Economic Development, as you mentioned?
I said we have an agreement with them to actually help oversee the programs with us. It's in participation with city staff.
I don't recall that, but if you say so, I don't recall that it actually happened. Thank you.
Am I losing it, or did we do it?
No, well, we have entered into an agreement with Cabrillo Economic Development Corporation to assist us in the marketing plan and lottery process to select the original buyer. They do not have an agreement to monitor ongoing. Currently, we have 20 properties that are sold, actually 17 that we monitor. I don't think it's necessarily an overwhelming task. I think the speaker alluded to some situations that had happened prior to probably most of us being here with respect to the way one of the projects was sold and was handled. And I think the city attorney has pointed out we've come a long way with the way the agreements are written now and the way they are implemented in terms of at least first sale. The agreements we have is not unmanageable at this stage. They may be at some point in the future, but they're not unmanageable at this stage.
Thank you. The city manager had a comment on this, and the question was, as I understood it, really, does the city have the ability to effectively manage this type of program with current resources?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, sorry I was called out for another item. It's not a problem at all for staff to manage this, and accusations that staff isn't doing it or not capable are totally false. So I have full confidence in Russ Watson and his crew to manage the contracts. It's a relatively small number of contracts. And I don't foresee a problem in the future. And if we got to that point, we'd come back requesting either additional staff or an outside consultant or contractor to help us.
I'd just like to add that our staff, we have been down one position for a number of months. Interview processes are complete. A selection will be made relatively soon. That will spend quite a bit of attention to this overall topic. So,
are there excuse me, are there any further questions? Okay, what's the pleasure of the council? Mrs. Irwin?
I'll go ahead and move the staff recommendation. I think it's probably a more fair formula, and it sounds like it's used throughout the state. I do want to say, though, it is making this change is, obviously potentially going to cost the redevelopment agency some money, because we have to be fair to the owners that currently have signed agreements. So that's my motion.
Okay, and the motion is the staff recommendations 1, 2, and 3. That's correct? Comments to the motion? Mrs. Bill de la Pena.
Not so much a comment as it is a question for the city attorney. If you could, or perhaps Mr. Watson, just mention one more time how this will affect the existing properties on which we already have reached agreements during our last housing study session.
There's the properties that already have existing agreements are all based on median income. We have spoken to some people, have requested sales information, and we have tentatively given them the price based on the affordable, explaining what the process would be, because in that situation, the affordable is a higher price, a resale price than the median income. So it'll be up to them, which I don't think is going to be an issue, that we'll amend the agreements to reflect the affordable housing cost process, or we may just wait and just do the new sale when it gets sold. I mean, we haven't figured out all the niceties, but that's how it'll work. So we have made some of those contacts have already been made, and Mr. Watson, I'm not sure if there's been more contacts made besides those.
not recently. I'm aware of at least 3 owners that are interested in moving forward with a disposition of property. And I suspect that once we have the ability to give them a fixed number that is different than what their change of median income number calculates to, that they will make a decision to either dispose of that property or wait and see what happens in the near future with it.
Okay. Any additional comments to the motion? There being none, please vote.
Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you. Item 10B, Local Affordable Housing Preference Program. Mr. Watson again.
Mr. Mayor, this item is also a follow-up item to the affordable housing study session held in March 2006. The department worked very closely with the city attorney's office to address the matters that are outlined within the staff report. The there are some significant issues to discuss through this evening with respect to implementing preference provisions. However, I think it is the council's desire at least to consider these items and either adopt this resolution or give staff additional direction. A lot of the issues I will defer to the city attorney with respect to the details with respect to equal protection or right to travel or how that's actually implemented within fair housing law. I'm just not an expert in that field. However, through the process of evaluating the preference issue, staff is in a position to recommend that we formalize a residency and employment preferences defined within the staff report. The basic information provided alludes to the fact that there are many residents within this community that cannot afford the median housing price of the Conejo Valley, which is significantly higher than the median housing price of the county overall, albeit our median income is also higher based on 2005 American Community Survey by the Census Bureau, reflecting nearly a $90,500 median income price in median income for Conejo Valley versus $79,500 for the county. It is the county's number that we use in calculating affordable housing costs, however. Information presented indicates that nearly 70% of the households that fall into the moderate income or lower cannot afford to qualify for $625,000 median house price and stay within the affordable housing cost. It's not to suggest that say 70% cannot buy a home. It is that they will be paying more than 35% of their median income, and in many cases banks will approve that at 45% of their income or even higher. And there are, I'm sure, families within this community that are paying 50% or more of their income towards housing. But it's putting the number back to the affordable housing cost index. That is the criteria that we will use to establish the fact that the citizens can't afford to purchase on the open market with respect to and meet those requirements of affordability. The residency preference is recommended within the staff report has to be applied without any duration of time, wherein if an individual comes tomorrow, enrolls their children in school, basically demonstrating an intent to stay within the community or have rented a place, that they would be eligible as a resident of this community without term with respect to have had to be here for 6 months or had to be here for a year. So the residency preference would be anybody that currently lives in City of Thousand Oaks would be eligible to participate in a residency preference. The employment preference data shows that we are a tax or job-rich community, and based on that, there's a number of individuals who work here have to commute. The ratio with respect that we believe is that at least 30% of the employees within Thousand Oaks do not live in Thousand Oaks, and somewhat underscored by the fact that 46% of the city's own employees do not have a Thousand Oaks residency. The ability to place an employment preference has a number of quality of life amenities including transportation time, commute time, impact to the environment with respect to travel, gasoline consumption, particulate material, greenhouse effects, a variety of reasons that gives a council the ability to establish and dictate that a housing preference for employees within the community is something that is of benefit to the community. The preference relating to whether it be by jobs, specific jobs, police, fire, teacher, nurse, or whatever, is a little bit more problematic. However, is noted in the supplemental handout material that there are clearly communities that provide a preference by employment type. Most of those, however, in terms of our evaluation, relate more to financial assistance as opposed to a particular unit preference where you can only buy that unit because it's an affordable unit because you have this type of a preference. The programs that seem to be implemented generally, not necessarily exclusively, are more of a down payment assistance, financial participation that is being offered, is summarized within the supplemental information. Based on the information we've provided within the staff report, the preference that we are recommending would be for that of all the units that the redevelopment agency or city have control over in terms of first sale, that at least 50% of those units would be offered on a preference program. That would be implemented in such a way that if there was a resident and they cared to participate in the lottery process, they would get an application because they are resident. They would get an application because there is a lottery. So within the designation of units available, they would have the ability to have two applications in, one as a preference, one as a lottery, the open lottery unrestricted. If they also currently worked here, they'd also have the ability to place that application in because they worked here. So if half the units are available under the preference program, they could apply as a resident, they could apply as a employed person within the community, and they could apply for the unrestricted unit, giving them more chances, I guess, to actually have that preference implemented with respect to their ability to obtain the affordable unit. The city's first-time homebuyer program would also use these preferences and could possibly be expanded for others elements within the future. Our first-time homebuyer program has been on hold. It will be reinstated shortly. There's just some logistical details we need to work out, and this is a first step towards that process. With that, I think I'll conclude the presentation and be available to answer any specific questions you have.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Questions? Mr. Watson, Mrs. Irwin?
I had a few questions. The first, I think that 50% number is way too high, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to lower that we are able to offer even more to residents than just 50% of the units. But I was wondering if the city attorney could go, because we really didn't have time to read about what the other cities are doing as far as preference programs for occupation. So could you go over that for us?
Yes, thank you. I can go over the supplemental if that's what you're referring to, or the chart. Most of them actually have something very similar to ours, which is live work. They're giving preferences based on people that are living in their city or working in their city, or both. And that takes care of the city of Fremont, city of Palo Alto, city of Concord, city of Anaheim, and city of Irvine currently. City of San Jose has, the one thing that we're looking at here is a teacher home purchase assistance program that they've adopted. The city of Novato has adopted quite a extensive priority, and I'd like to talk about them separate. And then the city of Irvine is looking at it, developing a teacher down payment homeowner assistance program. The problem with doing occupational preferences is there are 2 state law provisions that say that you're not supposed to discriminate in the housing based on source of income or lawful occupation, and it really raises an issue whether these kind of programs are violative of state law. And I don't want to really comment on the legality of someone else's program or why they decided they could do it. In terms of a teacher home purchase assistance program, they may feel they have, this particular city has a great amount of money that they're using for this program, and they may feel that because they have a number of down payment type of programs that sort of saves an argument that there's a discriminatory impact or that it's discrimination based on source of income. And one of the things that I would suggest that for our future work programs for the city is that maybe we try to get the state to change some of those restrictions that allow more flexibility in a preference program so that you're not trying to guess what would or might not happen. In terms of the city of Novato, I can't really comment on it other than what's here, which is they give preferences again based on your type of occupation, and I think as we've stated that there's really issues involved with that. The one that I think is most interesting is the city of Santa Ana, in conjunction with the state, has come up with a program to assist teacher home purchase programs. And one of the things about having the state do it is that they I don't know if they took any action to actually exempt them from those other state statutes, which they could possibly have done. The other thing with it is that they've designated it for low-performing schools, and it is similar to, there's a part of redevelopment law allows you to have preferences for police, and it may even be other type of vital occupations in what has been termed sort of distressed areas, and there's specific areas like in LA they can do that. So that program for the city of Santa Ana is a really interesting one that they're doing, and they may be doing something similar to what was done with the redevelopment agencies. And in that case with redevelopment, it's a specific state law, and it's would, in my opinion, it would say the legislator knew about the other ones, about the source of income and no discrimination, and that they've allowed an exception in this case by having use of occupation as a method to help distressed areas or distressed schools. The other thing that's not mentioned here and might have something to do with part of the Novato program is there is state government code section that allows a city or a county or a city and county to actually build rental housing for employees, and employees is defined very broadly so that a city could do a program and then give preference to not just its own employees but county, state, any other school district, any basically public employee would have access on a priority basis to that housing. So there's a specific code section that allows that to occur that again would trump the code sections in state law saying you can't discriminate on the basis of source of income. All of these programs, I have a big caveat, which is no matter what the state says you can and can't do, even if you do a program that's allowed under state law, you still have to make sure that you are not violating federal, either constitutional law or Fair Housing Act. And the biggest problem with some of these programs in an area like Thousand Oaks is when you get into what are your demographics. Like there had been some talk about there was maybe an interest in helping police officers be able to get into housing. Well, we looked at some of the demographics for the sheriff's department, and like our own city, minorities are still underrepresented in for sworn officers. That becomes an issue if you have preferences that where there are underrepresentation by minorities, then you could be in violation of the Fair Housing Act because of the disparate impact, and there's no bright line. In our own city, the reason we're recommending that we do a live and work live program is to try to counteract any disparate impacts to minorities or any other protected class. So that was a long way to answer your question, but I hope I was able to give some input or insight into those programs.
Okay. So you think some of these programs are problematic, basically, and the city would be at risk of a lawsuit, and if we looked at something like a preference to certain occupations.
I think that the city could be at risk to do preferences based on occupations, yes, and especially without, if the city was interested in looking further into that, then there needs to be a nexus study done to show that there really is a problem, and we'd have to look at the demographics of the occupations, and we'd have to look at the state law as well. I think that state law causes a real concern.
So could that be part, if we pass this with the residents' preference right now, could part of it also be to look at how we could try and get occupations as part of it later on, look at what other cities are doing?
It's not so much what other cities are doing, it's what we can do. You know, so looking at, I mean, we can look at what other cities are doing, obviously, but it's more what is the council's comfort level in the city, your comfort level from a legal perspective, as well as what's really needed. I think it's really legitimate tonight for the council to give direction to staff to say, we want you to investigate rental issues more. We want you to look at how could we possibly do some kind of occupational, and give direction to look at doing a nexus study and demographic studies to really show it, because unfortunately, we were not able to get demographic information on our local school teachers, and that was something we were trying to obtain so we could have a sense of that before even the meeting. The other thing that we could do that I think is legitimate without violating anything, and is we do have control over marketing, and that one of the things Simi Valley is currently doing. This is a little misleading in the table on page 4 or 5. Simi Valley does not actually offer preferences. What they do offer is preferences in their marketing programs. So they target specific occupations, or not specific, they target, you know, their live work. And you could do something similar in attempting to target your lottery for the designated units to specific occupations, and I don't think that would be a violation. It's just where you're putting your marketing. So one of the things the city staff could work on is when we do market, even though you're marketing to the entire city, that you would target if there were certain populations, occupations that you define as vital services or whatever, that, because then everybody still has a chance to apply, but you're making sure that those people that you think need to know about the programs know about it. And that's something, you know, we could do tomorrow. The only other thing I wanted to comment on briefly is the numbers. The 50% is not written in stone, but it's clearly done to protect the city against any claims of discrimination or disparate impact. So I just caution the council, if you're going to change that number, that you need to keep that in mind, that the higher percentage that goes to preference, then the greater risk we're putting ourselves at. I mean, that's just the way to look at it. So I would just, there is room there. There is no bright line, but I just caution the council that I wouldn't go to 80, 90. I would be concerned going over 75% or 70. I think that range is more reasonable, but I do have a concern about the higher we go. Thanks.
Thank you. Anything further, Mrs. Irwin? Okay, Mrs. Bildale-Pena.
Thank you. My question for staff is either the city attorney or Mr. Watson is, from the other Ventura County cities such as Fillmore and Simi Valley, which were mentioned tonight, have we received any feedback? Have we tried to find out whether their program has worked? Fillmore, for example, requires that a resident live in the city for 1 year, within city limits, obviously, whereas Simi Valley does not seem to have such a requirement. And obviously, the goal for affordable housing is for someone to be able to afford to move into the city. But will they, if we do have a 1 year waiting period or requirement, will any such person be able to do that? Have we received any feedback from the other cities that actually have that requirement?
I'm going to jump in really quick. We cannot have a 1 year residency requirement. A durational requirement is would really violate the right to travel rules. And once you do that, once you implicate, right to travel is guaranteed under the Constitution, and once you implicate a protected right under the Constitution, then we have to have a compelling state interest to do what we're doing. And unfortunately, courts haven't really looked well on those. When you don't implicate a constitutional right, like a right to travel, or you don't implicate taking action against a protected class, like minorities or disabled people, then you just have to have a rational basis. And clearly, our findings here definitely rise to the level of a rational basis for the actions of council, and arguably maybe they rise to the level of compelling interest. But durational requirements, a year, 90 days, a week, have been struck down repeatedly by the courts. So, and I want to give a caveat. There's many cities that have requirements that if you look on their web pages, if you talk to them, they may be there, but it doesn't mean they're actually implementing those requirements. But I'll let Mr. Watson talk about whether they're actually doing that or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional comment, Mr. Watkins?
Well, locally, I don't know that I won't profess to say that I know exactly how each of the programs are working, although I've had conversation with most of the housing planners within each of these jurisdictions. And I think in general terms, they feel that it works for their community without necessarily getting into the specifics as to, well, how did you do the 1 year preference if I did not ask those questions. I really didn't think it was my place to do so. It works for their community. They haven't expressed any discord with them. Some of the requirements, I think, are in place, not necessarily within this list of communities, but they also have an in lieu fee. And the reality is that there's an in lieu fee paid on some of these projects, or the implementation of these projects, wherein the implementation of the preference provision really doesn't come into play. I also just want to note that the supplemental information provided is not intended to be an exhaustive list of all the programs out there. There are many different varieties, and in conversations with various communities, they all have their own little unique implementation programs, but yet it seems to work for their community.
Thank you, Mr. Watkins. Dr. Clancy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Concerning the information in the supplemental package, do we know how long these various cities have had their programs in action and whether there's been any tests?
I do not. I know the Novato program was Air Force Base closure, and I know there is special legislation within the redevelopment law that allowed the redevelopment plan to be adopted. What I don't know is if the preferences are specified within the state legislation. I can easily find that out. I just didn't get a chance to follow up on that. But I don't know specifically how long each of these have been in place. I do believe that they have a tendency to be modified from time to time, though.
I know that some of the cities, like Palo Alto, has been in place for a number of years, very long time. I don't know of any case from California, whether there's a trial court case I haven't been made aware of, but I know that there aren't any court cases on those subjects that I was talking about, like the state source of income issues have not. There are no case laws. I can tell you that preference cases for residents have been tested on a federal level having to do with rentals and Section 8 preference programs. And one of the things the courts have clearly said, because under federal rules for HUD, for housing authorities to set preferences, they can do local preferences. But even in that case, they still cannot violate the Federal Housing Act. So many times you can do the preferences, but you have to make sure that in implementing them, you're not violating any other Fair Housing Act or constitutional rights. So there's some cases that we can look to from different jurisdictions that are federal that give you some guidance, which is why we did some of the things we did, such as looking at having it come back in a year so that the council can judge how well the programs are working and whether we're having a disparate impact on any protected classes. The other thing we did is, it is one of the reasons that we did suggest that there be units open to the general public. It's trying to counteract any of the charges of disparate impact. But in terms of the state statutes, there are no cases on that.
Dr. Thank you. As long as Ms. Albano is talking, does the concept of deferred payment loan, such as San Jose uses, does it entail as much risk as, say, just a standard preferential housing program?
I think it depends. I mean, clearly our home buyers assistance program, there are no where you can say, well, it's open to the general public and therefore you counteract your disparate impact argument. So I think one of the things you have to look at is what is your demographics going to get you. San Jose is a much larger urban area. I know in Pasadena, they've done certain things because their demographics allow them to do it. I don't know about San Jose. They probably did a nexus study to support it, which means a study to show that there really is a housing crisis for teachers. So you have some kind of rational basis for doing it. And two, they probably looked at the demographics. One of the things that a community like Thousand Oaks has to be careful about, we're very different than some other communities. Unfortunately, a lot of times when these cases are filed, they're filed against wealthier communities that have very few minorities in them. And quite frankly, that fits what our description of Thousand Oaks is. So I think we have to be a little bit more sensitive to that and careful in how we choose to do. So if we were to look at a program like City of San Jose is doing, we would have to look at a nexus study. We'd have to look at the demographics of what it would be. And you're still, one of the arguments against that we're violating those state law provisions is saying that we have a similar program for the members of the public, which we do because we have it for people that reside and live here. So I can never give you a straight answer because I'm a lawyer, as you can tell.
Let me follow that up and get another crooked answer then. Does the housing crisis for teachers, could that be explained just through a lack of affordability?
I think you have to do a little bit more because we obviously know just from our own numbers and our staff report that there's a housing crisis for a large percentage of the City of Thousand Oaks population. So I think you need to start looking at how does the housing crisis differ for teachers. One of the programs that we didn't talk about tonight that another city established, it ended up that people who they thought they were going to help weren't really helping because it ended up many of them didn't meet the income qualifications because they were two-income families. So I think it's worth, if you're going to actually try to do something, to really look at the demographics, really look at the numbers and a nexus study. A nexus study wouldn't be that complicated, but you just want to be able to do it so that you can actually point to data showing why it's necessary.
Thank you very much.
If I'd like just to add, I know the City of Irvine's program is not implemented yet because they are still working through their nexus study.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Mrs. Irwin?
I had another question for Mr. Watson. You had mentioned earlier that there's probably about 30 units that are going to go on, restricted units. And will they all be coming on the market at the same time, or what kind of batches are they coming on?
Within our community?
Right, the 30 units that we had talked about, I think some Westlake Vistas and then the new ones, the Centex homes. I think you had mentioned that you thought that would be about 30 units.
In total, there are 8 units at Racket Club that have an affordability covenant. There are 6 units at Centex. Those are the only units I know that are coming on board. From the private development perspective, the city has 3 units in Park Lane that it will be offering for sale. So I don't know whether or not my saying 3 was interpreted as 30, but it's 3 units that we will be putting on for sale shortly.
Cumulatively, the cumulative effect of what you just said was 24, or 27, I'm sorry. Just clicking out the numbers from different sources.
Yeah, but with respect to what's coming online for sale, it would be the Racket Club, which grading is happening now, and the Syntax project, which was just recently approved. I don't have a time frame for their implementation.
And it's separate lotteries for all of them, right?
There would very likely be separate lotteries for each of those, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions of staff? Okay, I have one speaker card on this matter, Suzanne Duckett. Ms. Duckett.
Suzanne Duckett, Thousand Oaks. I'm not as concerned about the rental properties as I am the for sale properties. So to go back to that issue, as long as staff is going to absolutely monitor these units, not even on a yearly basis, but probably a 6 months basis, and be totally responsible for these units. I'd like to know if, I have 2 questions. One is, are these escrow papers specially marked? And 2, has the, if a person who owns one of these affordable units goes out and borrows money against the unit, has that whole issue of those loans been addressed? Because when we were in committee, this was just coming out at the time, that people were borrowing far more than what they were supposed to be paying for the unit. They were able to borrow up to the market level on these units. And so it left Oxnard holding the bag. So I want to be sure that the mortgage, that the loan issue has been fully addressed, and that the mortgage papers are specially marked. Because if you're in a unit that has both market rate and affordable units, neighbors don't know whether the person next door paid affordable or paid market rate, and so they're not able to monitor each other probably because they don't know if their neighbors, what their neighbors paid for their unit. And so it has to be specially marked somehow, because anybody in an affordable unit could just go get a realtor and sell it, and the city will be left holding the bag. So I want those 2 issues addressed, as well as the city monitoring it on a 6-month basis. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Duckett. City Attorney, do you want to respond to those?
I
can respond in part, and Mr. Watson might want to respond in part. What happened in other cities, we're trying very hard not to have happen here, and you can't really comment on how things were done. For some of the units in the past, the whole resale restrictions were part of the CC&Rs, which can be a huge packet and buried, even though they weren't meant to be buried. And that wasn't, I don't mean here, but in other cities. So one of the things we've done now is clearly these documents are pulled out. They are no longer parts of CC&Rs. They stand on their own. They're clearly marked resale restrictions, and they're being picked up by title companies. Somebody that lives in a restricted unit, they may be able to go get a realtor, but these documents do show up in their chain of title. We're also looking at another mechanism to prevent the possibility that for refinances, so that people can't. Our agreements restrict the ability to refinance and the amount that you can refinance for, so that we don't end up in this situation that the speaker was talking about, where someone has taken out a debt much greater than what they're allowed to sell the unit for, or the resale restrictions on the unit. So we do have those provisions, and we are looking at ways to further identify our restrictions, so that when a refinancing occurs and the escrow company looks at title, that it's going to be picked up. And that's the big thing, is making sure that happens. Because someone violates a restriction, if we find out, we have mechanisms to enforce it. It doesn't mean that we would just, as a city, eat what happened. So clearly there are ways for us to protect ourselves, and as I said, the cities have gotten smarter and smarter on how to deal with these issues and how to make sure that the buyer is aware of all their obligations, as well as the city. And I'm not sure if Mr. Watson wants to add anything, if I hit it all.
I think you've pretty much covered it. I mean, just again, in talking with some of the other housing planners, it is an issue in many of the cities, not only in Ventura County, but throughout the state, as to how and when and if the resale restrictions are actually picked up by title companies and or by lenders. I think there have been cases where lenders don't necessarily care what the title looks like. But I also think that there are some very good steps that have been taken to protect against that, including just the title of the document. You know, resale restriction, you cannot refinance without approval. It is an issue not unique to this community. I don't think we have a significant problem currently. It is, I think we have mechanisms in place to guard against it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Watson. There being no further questions of staff, it's a pleasure of the council. Ms. Spildel-Pena.
Thank you. I'm very glad to see that this is being brought forth before the council, given the fact that not only Ventura County, Thousand Oaks, and as stated throughout the state, cities are dealing with this housing problem. I understand that staff is looking for direction as to how to proceed with this particular local affordable housing preference program. And as suggested by the city attorney, I would recommend that we conduct a nexus study to see whether we can do a preference program that would allow a workforce housing according to the job description or the job title, such as nurses was mentioned, or I'm sorry, teachers, for example. I think whichever way we may go tonight, that we do a nexus study to see for which particular occupation could be targeted in this case, or I shouldn't say targeted, but helped. And I do feel that the number of units, 50%, is probably quite safe. It shouldn't be anything less than that. If anything, it should be more. So those are my comments.
Did you have a motion also, or you just wanted to comment We don't.
I'm just commenting.
Oh, okay. Additional comment, Mrs. Irwin?
I think you did some good staff work. I understand this is a very difficult issue, and it is really important that we find some way to implement a local preference program, because keeping people off the road is very important. Keeping people in the community that they work is very important. It lets them get more involved with the community. I'm very disappointed that it appears, because of state and federal law, that we can't do preferences for occupations, but I think that maybe it'll help to do the targeted marketing. I would say, as far as I think the 50% number is way too conservative. We have to be very aggressive with this, because there are so few units that are actually going to be used in this program. So the number I heard you say, actually the most aggressive number that still seems safe, is to market 75% to local people that work here or live here, and 25% to, in general. And that would actually be my motion, would be the 75% number. I think I agree with Councilmember Bill de la Pena that we need to do a nexus study. I think we need to look at what we can do for rental units, if we can have rental units have the same type of preference for residents, and we should also do the demographic study. But I would like, after the first lottery, also that you come back and tell us how good was your targeted marketing program, and how many local residents that either lived here or worked here did you get in, and that maybe we make an adjustment that the targeted marketing isn't working. So I'm actually going to go ahead and make that as a motion.
All right. Would you fully state your motion then, and also are you including Ms. Bill de la Pena's suggestion for the nexus study in that motion?
I would.
See if you can give me a complete motion.
Yes, I would include the nexus study, looking at rental units, very aggressive target marketing, 75% for local preference, and continue to look at other ways that we might be able to get favorable opportunities for our workforce, our fire, our police, our teachers. I think if other opportunities come up, we should try and change state law if that's possible. Maybe talk to our legislators, because it is very important that those people that are in the vital occupations, that we do the best we can for them here in this city.
I think the city attorney has some questions on clarification of the motion. Albano?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and members of the council. First, I'd like to ask if the motion included adopting the attached council and agency resolutions with a caveat that we will change the 50% to 75% to go to preference. But when you say you'd like us to do a nexus study, can you give us a list of what occupations you're interested in? Because normally we need to have some kind of ideas of what occupations that the council is interested in looking at, and we can then go and explore that. And there was something else you said. I'm trying to go through the motion. It was
rental units. Look at if we can do local
and then
preference for rental units.
The rental units, what I would ask is that we can break these down, because the occupational will be different. The rental units, if you can, in that authorization, I assume we would be meeting with our partners that we normally partner with on rentals. And the only caveat with rentals, we can go ahead and look at it, but there are so many more constraints because of the different funding sources, just sort of a caveat to here to come. So it's three different things that your motion's really entailing. It's to go ahead with adopting the resolutions, changing it to 75%, actually four different things. Come back with a report to the council after the first lottery instead of waiting for a year, and then to employ a nexus study, and I'd ask if you could give us some feedback on some occupations you want us to look at, and then the looking at rentals and coming back on that as well.
Well, my opinion would be for the nexus would be fire, teachers, and nurses. And everybody else can add what they would like. I'm sorry, police, teachers, nurses. I've heard they make a lot of money. If somebody else suggests adding that, that's fine.
Okay, Mrs. Bildale, opinion?
How about if we encompass just public safety or emergency personnel? Would that perhaps suffice?
I would be much more...
in addition to teachers and nurses, of course.
The three categories you stated, but I would support adding personnel that can be in a community safety situation. We have a number of public works employees, municipal employees, that in the event of an emergency, they can't live here. They don't live here, and so I think they should be included. And I think that's what you were. Okay, Dr. Clancy.
Thank you. I have no more to add to the nexus. However, I will say, and I've said it before, that essentially every planning meeting I've ever gone to, where they've talked about housing needs for communities, has pointed out the need to provide across-the-board housing, full strata, because that community that does not provide full-spectrum housing doesn't really thrive. You've got to be able to house everyone that works in the community. It allows them to stay off the highways a little bit, reduces fuel consumption, traffic, air quality is improved, quality of life is improved, their ability to be involved in the city is enhanced. And so this is a first step anyway. I would like it, obviously, to see it continue and expand. So I'll gladly support your motion.
Thank you. Madam City Attorney, do you have what you needed?
Yes, I believe we do. Thank you.
Okay. I think now have a, yes, Mrs. Bildale, opinion.
I just have a question. Now that Dr. Glancy has mentioned this across-the-board preference, so to speak, in our staff report, it does mention service workers as well, and is that something that we could include?
Right now, the preference that you're adopting tonight is for people that live and or work here. If you ask us to look at all those that you just gave us, you basically just gave us everybody that lives and works here that falls into the affordable housing thing. So I really guess the way I see that you've sort of carved it out for right now is the vital workers, and we'll see how that works, because we have some challenging issues, as I pointed out in the staff report, around fire and police for our city to do something for them. So we're going to have to look at it. But in terms of what the preference does reach, it clearly reaches that level of service employees. I'm just concerned about, we didn't do a nexus study so far because we could rely on just our data. So I think right now it would be helpful for us if we focus more on maybe what I'm going to term for you in a loose sense, the vital occupations.
Okay. Is the city clerk comfortable with we have the scope of the motion? Okay, Mrs. Irwin, maker of the motion, final comment? I think. All right, please vote.
Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you very much. This it's a great step forward, and that's what it is, a step forward. So thank you. Item 11, Redevelopment Agency reports. We have none. Committee, Commission, Board reports. And I apologize and thank all of you for your patience as we worked our way through this. Council on Aging Annual Report. Harry Norkin, Council on Aging Chair. Harry, good evening.
Yes, and I can't. Before I begin, I'd like to introduce two members of the council, Judy Gosson, Vice Chair, and Jean Borghi, member. Would they please stand?
Good evening. Good evening.
We're pleased to stand before you tonight to report on the Commission's activities and accomplishments for the past fiscal year. The past year members reviewed the effectiveness of this Commission's outreach to senior adults in our community. In an effort to gain a larger television viewing audience and meeting participation interests, live broadcasts centered around a specific senior adult interest. The Commission's meeting covered a range of subjects including lifelong learning opportunities at Cal State University Channel Islands, fraud perpetrated against seniors, health care, medicines and medications, senility and Alzheimer's disease, baby boomers, affordable housing and transportation. The members of this Commission worked hard to bring about this change in programming, and it has been well received for the first year. Commissioners have been very successful in engaging knowledgeable speakers for our programs. In October, last October, at the request of the City Council, the Council on Aging hosted a program which provided a forum to the residents of Castle Hill Retirement Home and Castle Hill Management to discuss impending rent increases that could have forced residents out of their homes. City Council members attended the forum and pledged to do all they could to resolve this problem. Thanks to their involvement, a satisfactory solution was reached. In February, the Commission hosted a forum on affordable housing that brought together specialists in this area. The speakers were from Ventura County Star, City of Thousand Oaks staff, Area Housing Authority, Many Mansions, and the Cabrillo Development Corporation. This forum examined the status of affordable housing within the City of Thousand Oaks and included future planning. For the April broadcast, a panel discussion on transportation for seniors was held and included city staff members and the Ventura County Transportation Executive Director. At the last meeting of the year, a Pepperdine University professor presented information regarding baby boomers, their demographics, and the impact they will have on local government and volunteerism in communities. The importance of the upcoming baby boomer population had been under review by many entities, including the county and national area agencies on aging, nonprofit groups, and senior advocacy organizations, such as the Council on Aging, and will need to be factored into the extremely large emerging group in their long-term planning. The Commission had two major accomplishments during the past year. First, the Senior Services Directory was updated and the new edition was printed in May 2006. The Commissioners, under the able leadership of Mel Silverberg and Martin Shentes, spent untold hours assembling the data, cross-checking all entries, and then proofing the draft document for errors and typos. This directory is one of the most sought-after documents by seniors of this area. Over 1,500 directories have been distributed in 4 months. The second accomplishment came about because of citizens' reports. The Commission's interest in response to these requests and the doggedness of one member of the Commission, Jim Caniglio, pursued such a solution. The accomplishment is the shuttle service between Thousand Oaks and Kaiser Permanente and Woodland Hills. This Commission saw a need and became involved in moving this progress from a request to a reality. The implementation would be done with grant from the Ventura County Transportation Committee through the City of Thousand Oaks, partnering with Senior Concerns. One commissioner commented, "Without the outstanding leadership and vision of public works staff, this program would still be another empty idea on someone else's wish list." Every year, this commission selects one person to be honored as the Senior of the Year for their contributions to the welfare of other seniors. This person is selected from nominees provided by various senior service organizations. This year's winner was Richard Durning, who devoted many, many hours in service to his fellow seniors. He truly exemplified the meaning of volunteerism. Our plans for the future include continuing to create interesting and educational broadcasts as they relate to the senior population, develop a strategic outreach plan to reach senior adults and baby boomers in the community, promote and encourage participation in community senior adult activities, encourage a greater participation in the Senior of the Year awards, and provide vital information to seniors, including reminding them that the Council on Aging is their voice at City Hall. The Council also appreciates the supportive efforts of all and past current city staff, and as always, we acknowledge the guidance and leadership and support from the entire City Council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harry. Any questions, Mr. Norton? Very concise, very complete. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Item 13, council issues and recommendations. We have none. Mr. Mitnick, item 14, city manager, follow-up.
Would you like me to do that this time?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, by way of follow-up, so we had an individual who spoke with questions and concerns about traffic on Montgomery Road. And I believe Staff and Public Works has responded to these. What we will do, though, is Staff and Public Works Department will have a follow-up conversation, if not meeting with this individual. We'll better understand what the questions are, and we'll come up with potential options and get back to that individual and also report back to council. Another individual made a repeat request to have the city manager's office contact candidates with respect to political signs. And again, the city's policy, and this has been articulated to the council candidates during the orientation we had, is with respect to allegations of violations on private property, it's up to the private property owner to contact the police department with complaints about signs and so on. With respect to public property, staff does go out from Public Works in the major areas and remove signs from the public areas. I'll be glad to, myself or Linda Pappas-Diaz, to follow up with this resident to explain in more detail what the city does or what we don't do. That's it by way of follow-up. With respect to, sorry, I lost my place. Upcoming items. This Thursday, recently retired, long-standing general manager of the Caneo Rec and Park District Tex Board, there will be a retirement reception at the Hillcrest Center at 403 Hillcrest Drive. And I believe most of the council members will be attending that, as will a number of city staff members. That runs from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. Thursday, October 26th. As a speaker mentioned at the beginning, the Thousand Oaks Police Charitable Foundation will be holding the annual, or the 2006 Thousand Oaks Police Department Charity Golf Tournament at North Ranch Country Club on Monday, October 30th. There's still some slots available, correct, Mr. Police Chief? He's nodding affirmatively. If members of the public or members of the audience are interested in participating and helping out a good cause, please contact Mara Mulch at 494-8259. That is 494-8259. There may also be an icon or a connection on the city's website. There will not be a planning commission meeting or a council meeting, I believe, until after the election, which is on November 7th, 2 weeks from tonight. The next council meeting will be November 14th. There are, at this point, 3 public hearings worth mentioning, one dealing with the emergency directory boards for commercial buildings, and a singular has a cell site issue for 1051 Westlake Boulevard. This is an item that was continued from May. That'll come back to council on November 14th. And it's possible that a Tax Equity and Responsibility Act, or in other words, TEFRA hearing, will be on the agenda for a private developer doing a project on Shadow, for the Shadow Apartments on Los Feliz. That one's potential right now. So that is it by way of city manager follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mitnick. Item 15, we have no closed session. We're still holding in abeyance item 9, and at this point, the council will take a 20-minute recess. We will reconvene at 20 minutes to 9. We're back in session, and I'm going back to item 4, special announcements and a request for continuance of any public hearing or agenda item. We had a request from Mrs. Bilde La Pena on item 9, the department report on management services agreement with Los Robles. So at this time, I'll let Mrs. Bilde La Pena make her request.
Thank you. I'm just restating the request from earlier, as the mayor mentioned, to continue item number 9A, which is the management services agreement with Los Robles Greens Golf Course Complex. It is a large document, and additional information was received tonight. In addition to that, I had received a request from a citizen who had been trying to get the information on the new services agreement and was unable to do so, and was also, I don't have it formally in writing. This was a verbal request because the information was not available to the public until Friday, that more time was needed to go over the entire agreement. And of course, it is the will of the council to decide whether it should be continued or not.
Thank you, Ms. Bilde. Comments to the request from the council. Mr. Fox?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it may be helpful just, there has been extensive work on this. Maybe just a brief summary by Mr. Mitnick might help the council with some information on whether it would be prudent to move forward or continue this item.
Fine, I'll take it back to Mr. Mitnick. And also, Mr. Mitnick, if I understand correctly, the council committee was comprised of Mr. Fox and Mrs. Irwin. Is that correct? Okay, fine. Mr. Mitnick?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, the item, staff is respectfully requesting that council consider this item tonight. It is time sensitive. It can certainly be continued if that's council's request, but staff would strongly advise against doing that. If a resident is requesting information that he or she was not able to obtain from the city's website or other sources, staff will gladly meet with that individual or send that person copies of the information he's requesting. I'd like to just point out, and John Adams, our Assistant Finance Director, will give a full staff report, but I would like to point out the staff report itself is only 4.5 pages. There are agreements and so on that are attached that to make the overall agenda item longer, but it's written in very summary format and so on, and the issues are clearly delineated. And the issue has been, this contract has been an issue for several years, and the contractor with 3 of the representatives are here in the audience. The contractor has negotiated in very good faith with the staff of the city, and back in March, council did direct staff to negotiate with Evergreen, the contractor, and come back, and staff has done that. There's been extensive negotiations, and a number of meetings with the ad hoc committee has taken place, and staff has followed the suggestions from those meetings with the committee members. The reason it's time sensitive is that the contractor, Evergreen, has been operating on a month-to-month basis for several years now, and they've had a lot of uncertainty. And one of the consequences of that uncertainty is there have been delays in capital projects and other aspects of the operation as a result of that uncertainty. There's clearly a long-standing need for those of you who play out there or hear from residents who play out there. There are a number of long or significantly needed capital improvements that have been put on hold for years, and the contractor needs to get started, and time is of the essence, as they would like to get moving right away. There's also equipment that needs to be leased. There are new golf carts that need to be purchased. And more importantly, from the human aspect, the emotional aspect, is the employees of Evergreen who've been dealing with this uncertainty for quite some time, and they would like to get on with their lives and their jobs. And also the users of the service, the golfers of the community, they would like some certainty and see improvements be made. So with that, and also staff has been pretty good about sharing with the full council the progress of this effort. And so it wasn't just a surprise that the item appeared on the agenda. So that's it by way of comments from myself. And again, John Adams, along with Candy Hong and Liz Perez, are prepared to make a PowerPoint presentation to council.
Thank you. Mr. Fox?
Thank you for that, Mr. Minnick. I would encourage the council that we move forward on this item tonight. I think Mr. Mitnick outlined very well that this has been an ongoing issue dating all the way back to 2003, actually, and there are no surprises in this staff report. Staff report was provided to the council Thursday. There's been ample time to review it, ample time to ask questions of city staff. Mr. Mitnick, has any council member contacted you with any follow-up questions or any quest for additional information since it was disseminated?
Two council members did ask questions, and they were answered ahead of time.
Okay. And so I think what we need to do is we need to move forward, get the full staff report. If there's information that is provided during the course of the staff report or in public comment, then I think council may be in a position, if there is still a concern, for consideration of a continuance. But this has been through the committee process. I can't emphasize enough the issue of uncertainty. That is a key issue, and it affects a lot of different areas, not just the operator. And so I think I would be inclined as chair of the committee to recommend that we move forward on this item.
Thank you. Any additional comments? As I read the consensus of the council, it's to move forward with this item at this time. Thank you, Ms. Spildell. At this time, I'll call item 9A, Management Services Agreement, Los Robles Greens Golf Course Complex. John Adams, Deputy Finance Director. Mr. Adams.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Tonight, staff is presenting for City Council approval a long-term agreement between the City of Thousand Oaks and Evergreen Alliance Golf Limited, also known as Eagle or Evergreen, for management services for the Los Robles Greens golf course. So I'll start my presentation right now. As you may remember, earlier this year on March 7th, City Council authorized staff to negotiate an agreement with Eagle or Evergreen Alliance. As part of that direction to staff on March 7th, City Council agreed to 4 goals that needed to be met as part of the any long-term agreement with the operator of the facility. The goals were as follows. Operator provides a quality facility. City provides user fee flexibility to operator to maximize revenue and to provide affordable fees and discounts. City and operator sharing the risk. And Los Robles Greens Golf Course is self-supporting with no general fund subsidy. Looking at the top goal, or the number 1 goal, since 2003, Eagle has been the interim operator, and during that period of time, city staff has worked diligently with Eagle facility and maintenance staff to improve the condition of the course from the prior operator. Staff and Eagle have met as often as weekly to improve the course, with the goal of meeting the expectations set forth by council, the city, the residents, and the golf community. In addressing this goal, staff felt it was best to provide a few before and after pictures that will show the improvements of the course from the prior years. With the 2 pictures above, this is of the practice bunker as you're entering the course. The first picture on the left is the prior before picture. The picture on the right is the current photo of the bunker. If you can tell, the manicure and the maintenance of the bunker are pretty synonymous with the various other bunkers. Picture 2, the number 3 tee box. Just the capital improvements that have been done as far as new sidewalk, overgrown grass, trash can. Picture number 3. The number 3 green, just growth as far as filling in the facility. And the final picture is the number 3 green. The picture on the left is the before, which is mostly dirt and some patchy grass. Picture on the right is the current picture of the number 13 green. As you can see from the pictures, Eagle has made an asserted effort to improve the course and thus enhancing the golfer's experience at Los Robles. Major terms of the agreement. In further meeting the council goals, the following list represents the major bullet points of the management agreement with Eagle. Length of the term, or length of the agreement. The initial term of the agreement is 10 years. There's also an option for extending the term an additional 5 years at the city's sole discretion, and the agreement can be renegotiated at the end of the initial term. Management services and reporting. With the new agreement, Eagle will be responsible for all services to manage, maintain, market, and operate Los Robles Greens Golf Course. Currently, there's duplication of services between city staff and Eagle related to the facility maintenance and operations. To ensure Eagle is meeting the 4 goals on an annual basis, Eagle will provide the city the following: a management and operations plan, a facility budget, a grounds maintenance plan, a facility maintenance plan, a marketing and promotions plan, and a financial condition report. In negotiating compensation and to ensure that Eagle would participate in some of the risk of the operations, staff and Eagle developed a 2-tier fee schedule for compensation. Eagle will earn a base fee of $100,000 per year with an annual escalator. This base fee is to cover their overhead and indirect costs. Eagle will also earn a contingent management fee, which is equal to 12% of the net operating income of the facility. Based on the year 1 pro forma, it is estimated that approximately $96,000 will be paid to Eagle based on a projected NOI of $801,000. Net operating income is also defined as all revenue minus operating expenses. This excludes capital improvements. Annual performance review. To ensure financial performance, the City and Eagle have agreed to a minimum NOI of $800,000 during the initial term of the agreement for determining the contingent management fee. If during the initial term NOI is less than $800,000, the contingent management fee will be reduced to $10,000 or 10%. If NOI is less than $800,000 for any 3 of the 5 years, the City may terminate the agreement. Course and facility fees. The agreement will continue to provide the appropriate discounts for residents, seniors, and juniors. The agreement also provides flexibility with fees by setting yearly ceilings. To assist in setting the annual fees, Eagle will provide an annual market survey of comparable golf courses and a marketing and promotions plan that will ensure that Eagle has the ability to maximize income while providing an affordable quality facility. Capital contribution. Eagle will provide a capital contribution of $150,000 for the development of the vacant parcel for an outdoor event area. Following are drawings of the conceptual plan for developing the adjacent parcel into an outdoor event area. Facility staff is working with Eagle's construction director to develop plans for permitting and construction. Estimated time frame is the fall of 2007 for completion. And then finally, in addition to the management agreement, staff is recommending or requesting to amend the Jan's House lease. The following are major bullet points of that amendment. The length will match the management agreement. The amount, the annual amount will be $24,000. The escalator is an annual CPI based on the Los Angeles, Ventura counties market. And the operating expenses will be paid by the leasee, while the capital repairs are paid by the city. Currently, the general manager of the golf course lives at the residence. In conclusion, staff recommends approving the management agreement and lease agreement with the Eagle. Staff and representatives of Eagle are here and available for questions.
Thank you very much. Questions of staff? Ms. Spildell.
Thank you. Mr. Adams, is there, where's the opt-out option, so to speak, if there is a breach on either side, either by the city or the golf course operator?
If I remember correctly, it's in Section 5 of the agreement. I'm sorry. As far as the contingent management fee, it's identified in 4.04, paragraph 2. You're talking about the opt-out on the performance, correct?
Is that the one on page 15 of our staff report?
It's on page 11 of 31 on the staff report, page 16 on the agenda. Section 2 there, second paragraph.
Which page is it?
I can read the paragraph. During the first 10 years of the agreement, which is the initial term, if at any time the annual net operating income is below the contingent management fee threshold at the end of a calendar year for 3 out of 5 years, the city may, at its sole option and discretion, terminate the agreement. The contingent management fee is defined in paragraph 4.04B, where it says contingent management fee, which is on page 15. The contingent management fee shall be an amount equal to 12%. And then on paragraph 1, it says if at any time the annual net operating income is less than $800,000 contingent management fee threshold, the operator's contingent management fee shall be an amount equal to 10%.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any additional questions of staff? Mr. Fox?
Thanks, Mr. Adams. If you could just briefly go over, I think most of the golfers in the community are interested in the resident fees versus non-resident fees. And so if you could just briefly go over what we agreed and negotiated into the contract with respect to membership has its privileges. So if you live in Thousand Oaks, you're going to pay less than if you live out of Thousand Oaks and you play the course.
And I apologize for not clarifying that during the presentation. In the report, the discounts will continue to be at the same, which is 80%. Resident versus non-resident is 80% of the non-resident fee. There's also additional discounts on top of that for both senior residents and junior residents, which is an additional 20% as well.
All right. Then also, could you just briefly, maybe Candace or whoever might want to talk about the fact that we've also included in this, through our formulas, a pretty good assurance that the golf course will be self-supporting, so there'll be no general fund money that would be coming out in terms of supporting the golf course in addition to the fees.
That was a significant part of our negotiations with the operator. We wanted to make sure that we covered our cost of depreciation and our cost of debt service for improving the golf course. So that's where this minimum $800,000 NOI came from, net operating income came from, because we knew we needed around that amount to break even on the golf course. So that's just what we've seen over the history of the last couple years of operations.
And to further clarify that, Councilmember Fox, in the packet or in the staff item, Exhibit J shows the 10-year pro forma that we used as our basis to determine what the minimum NOI would be. And so we did 10-year projections of what the contract would entail.
Right. In fact, that was going to be my next question. If you could, for the benefit of the public, they don't have the report.
Correct.
And most sane people wouldn't read all those facts and figures, but if you could just maybe give a very brief example of first what NOI is and then how the formula will work with respect to either the increase or the decrease in rounds of play at the golf course. Just very briefly.
Okay. I'll make it very brief. Just an overview, the golf course generates approximately $4 million in revenue. That revenue comes from green fees, cart rental, driving range, pro shop, and food and beverage. That is based on our projections of approximately 86,000 rounds per year. We used a 1% growth factor, which is the highest years that we've seen in as far as use of the golf course was in the 100,000. Expenses, out of $4 million for revenues, there's cost of goods sold, which is only about $500,000, and then operating expenses, which equal to about $2.8 million as a base year, which generates total expenses of $3.3 million. Based on a $4.1 million projected first year and $3.3 million in total expenses, net operating income would be $800,000. Hopefully I covered enough.
Okay, so that explains the NOI, and now how the formula works.
Of the NOI, which we have $800,000, Eagle gets 12% of that, which would be based on the $801,000, $96,153. The city would receive $705,000 of the net operating income, which is 88%. Of that 88%, the city has its own costs of the bonds or the debt that was issued for the loan between the general fund and the golf course. So there's interest expense, there's administrative expenses, depreciation, and then capital expenditures as well. So based on what we project for 10 years worth of city expenses, we ensure that the golf course will be self-supporting.
Okay, and then finally, if you could just briefly provide the rationale behind a 10-year contract. Why are we entering into a contract that I think most folks would consider to be a long contract?
Long term.
What's the rationale behind that?
One of the things I think we didn't really touch much about it, but was the capital, the actual vacant parcel. Part of the negotiations provided Eagle to do sort of what we would consider a buy-in into the contract. They're putting up $150,000 to develop the vacant parcel. In talking about a long-term lease, I think we, in giving them some security as far as their employees and putting efforts into the facility, we have a good track record over the last 3 years with them. The thought is to give them some security, but also give us some performance measures that if they drop below a certain NOI, that we have the option to terminate the agreement if the performance isn't matching what the city expectations are.
Okay, I think I appreciate staff going through that. I know that certainly you guys have done a tremendous amount of work. We've been dealing with this for a long time. And this is an important facility for the community, and I think certainly for those that haven't been intimately involved, don't have the benefit of the staff report, I think just covering some of the basic facts that are outlined in the report is beneficial for the community, because we have a lot of folks that visit Los Robles either through the banquet facility or actually play golf there, and I think they need to recognize that we're serious about maintaining this facility. That's why we're entering into a lease agreement for 10 years, because we want that certainty with respect to the operator, and we also have performance measurements to make sure that that the facility is maintained. And I think you did a great job in providing those pictures, because I think a lot of the members of the council have received positive feedback and input from the community, and that's why Evergreen's sitting here tonight, because they've done a good job. So hats off to staff. You guys did a great job. I know it's a long time coming. Mr. Mitnick and your staff, you guys did good work. And certainly we'll hear from the speakers, but I think council needs to move forward with a supporting vote for this tonight.
Thank you. Additional comments? Mrs. Bell-Delapenny.
Thank you. I do have a question. Is the goal to be self-sufficient with this facility or to actually make money?
Well, it'd be nice to make money. I think we want to do as many improvements as are needed on the course, and so the city is on the hook for making those improvements as part of this contract. But I think that we're even breaking even, paying for depreciation, that allows to set money aside to do those improvements, and that's part of this contract. And what we are hoping to accomplish is have the money set aside so we can do more things to the course.
Is it realistic to believe that in 10 years we will actually make money, or not at all?
I think it's realistic. I think the operator is doing some things to try to encourage golf play. They've got a lot of upside potential on renting out the facility and the food part of the facility. They've got a lot of opportunity still to increase revenue there. And they recognize that, and I think this contract's also giving them the flexibility to try some things to create more interest in the course.
Thank you. I think the city manager has a comment. Mr. Mitnick?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. As a follow-up to the very good question or questions that were asked, It should be pointed out the one thing that neither the city nor Evergreen can control over the next decade is the amount of competition that may or may not exist from other golf courses, public and private, in the surrounding communities. That's always the big uncertainty, and of course what happens with the overall economy and the level of interest among young people and so on. But the big uncertainty is the number of courses that continue to be built. At least from my perspective, that's why it's hard to project.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments of staff? Being none, I have two cards. One is from Mr. Keith Hanley from Eagle, available for questions only. If there are any questions, Eagle Management. The second speaker card is Mr. Bob Wilson. Mr. Wilson. Mr. Wilson seems to have left for the evening. Okay, no further questions. Any further questions of staff? Pleasure of the council. Mr. Fox.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I would recommend, one, that the council approve a 10-year management agreement with Evergreen Alliance Golf Limited, Eagle, for the Los Robles Greens Golf Course Complex and Community Facilities effective January 1st, 2007 through December 31st, 2016. Seems like a long time. And item number 2, that we approve the amendment number 1 to the lease agreement as outlined in the staff report. And again, I just want to, in making some final comments, thank Evergreen for their patience. I think it needs to be mentioned that we have a company here that operated essentially on a month-to-month, if you will, for 3 years, and really showed good faith to the city. The other, I think, point that needs to be made is, notwithstanding that uncertainty, made improvements to the golf course, brought it up to the type of standard that I think our residents and folks that play the course expect. They run a first-class operation there, and it's certainly in the city's interest as well as the communities to have that type of operator. That's what we looked for. Well, we want a professional experience. We also want to maintain kind of the hometown Los Robles feel at the golf course, and I think you guys have struck that balance very, very well, and appreciate all the work that you've done, and we look forward to a really long and beneficial partnership with the city and your company.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. The motion is for approved recommendations 1 and 2. Additional comments to the motion, Mrs. Bilde-Lapena.
Thank you. I will support the motion, but I would like to make sure that in the future, when a member of the public, and this particular individual was actually on the Citizen Ad Hoc Committee, that they be allowed to see the documents as early as possible. We've obviously followed this for the last 3 years, but apparently this particular person claimed that he did not have access to this. So hopefully in the future, when a resident makes an inquiry, that he or she can be provided with the information.
Thank you. Additional comments to the motion, Mr. Fox, maker of the motion. Think further, please vote.
I don't have your vote, Mrs. Bilde-Lapena. Let's vote again.
Everyone, please vote again. Dr. Clancy? And vote again, please.
There we go. Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. That concludes our agenda for this evening. I'm sorry? I'm looking for that section that says adjournment here. I'm trying to find it on my minutes. Before we adjourn this evening, I'd just like to welcome, we have a group of city employees who are here this evening that have embarked on a 6-month Leadership Academy. This is part of the city's, one of the council's goals for succession planning. And this particular group of city employees meet formally 1 day a month without outside assignments. Once they complete this and graduate from this, they will become the instructors in future classes of city employees. And tonight's exercise is to give them an opportunity to observe a council meeting all the way through. And 9:15, that isn't too bad. It's when they get in the wee small hours. Anyhow, to all of you that are here this evening, thank you so very much for your commitment to the city, what you're doing, your commitment of time, effort, and energy. It's significant, and it's greatly appreciated by this council and by the residents of our city. Thank you. At this time, I'm going to adjourn the council meeting. And on behalf of the entire City Council, we're adjourning in memory of Miguel Ramos, the father of Public Works employee Manny Ramos, and Dr. Raymond Olson, President Emeritus of California Lutheran University. Miguel Ramos came to America from Mexico in 1953 and lived the American dream with his wife, Hermina, here in Ventura County. They ran a business and raised 6 children and sent all of them to college. Miguel was an active member of Christ the King Church in Oxnard and became a United States citizen in 1997 because he believed in voting for laws and people who promoted social justice and protected the poor. Miguel is survived by his wife, Hermina, his 6 children, including Manny, a Public Works employee, and 12 grandchildren. Secondly, Dr. Raymond Olson, 96 years of age, and a pastor with the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, served as the 2nd president of California Lutheran University and left his mark on CLU as well as our entire community. For 8 years, he served at CLU from 1963 to 1971 and helped make the dreams of the founding CLU fathers come true, steering the course for the university to become what it is today. Under his leadership, Community Leaders Club was founded because he believed that the college president needed to be involved in the community, and involved he was. He is the founding president of the now Caneo Las Virgenes, at that time Caneo Future Foundation, and founding chair emeritus of the Alliance for the Arts, the fundraising arm of the Thousand Oaks Civic Arts Plaza. In fact, he and his wife Helen are the honorary founders of the Alliance for the Arts, since it was during his leadership of the Future Foundation that Caneo Task Force for the Arts was initiated, which established the Alliance for the Arts. Dr. Olson was a major supporter of building the Thousand Oaks Civic Arts Plaza. The fact is that Dr. Olson's quote, "We need a place where we can perform. We need a place where we can exhibit. We need a place where we can simply come together and know who we are and what we can do and what we can be," served as the theme that the Alliance used for its fundraising efforts to help get the Civic Arts Plaza built. Dr. Olson was president. Dr. Olson was presented the Dr. Raymond M. Olson Award of Excellence in 2002 from the Alliance for his generous support. Dr. Olson, also an active member of the Thousand Oaks Rotary Club and Ascension Lutheran Church. He was named Man of the Year by the Chamber of Commerce in 1980 and served on both the boards for the Caneo Valley Historical Society and United Way. He is survived by his wife of 69 years, Helen, 3 children, Eloise Cohen, Sing Rich, Rolf Olson, and many grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Our thoughts and prayers are with the families at this time. We now adjourn to 6 p.m. on November 14th, 2006. We are adjourned.